Hey, well, welcome everyone. My name is Kara. I work as the program director at the Quag Wildlife Refuge, and I'm very excited to talk to you all about waterfowl that migrates to Long Island in the wintertime. So tonight's program is called Winter Waterfowl. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat while I'm presenting. And then at the end, if you have any questions, you can definitely unmute yourself or continue to ask questions in the chat. So now is a very exciting time at the Wildlife Refuge. So the beginning of a new year means that we are doing things that we normally do, just like guided hikes. We have a Light the Night event coming up on January 24th that I would highly recommend coming to. It's one of my favorite events. And also, we are in 2026 starting a renovation of our nature center, which is a really exciting project that you can learn more about on our website. And it will increase the space in the nature center. We'll be able to upgrade our exhibits, but where a lot of these pictures on in this program, especially, were taken from the Nature Center's front room overlooking Old Ice Pond. That room will just be, improved, but it will stay mostly the same because it is so nostalgic and we all love it, the way it is. So the Nature Center is going to get a little bit of love this year. And if you want to know more about that, you can always ask any questions to me. You could come in person or give us a call, check out our website to see what is coming up. So exciting things. And the ducks are definitely here. So the we'll go over a little bit of the history of the refuge because the Quag Wildlife Refuge did start as a waterfowl sanctuary for ducks and geese, which is why this topic is so appropriate. And then we'll get into adaptations, behaviors of waterfowl that comes to spend their winters here. We'll get into the species that live, especially on this pond, and then throughout different parts of bodies of water on Long Island, and how you can help ducks and species of geese too. So the refuge in the early 1900s was actually the site of the Quag Ice Company. And the pond that we see many species of waterfowl, it is called Old Ice Pond because that's what it was in the early 1900s. Through the 1920s, this freshwater pond was used as an ice harvesting pond where they would collect natural ice during the wintertime and store it in an ice house. And inside of the ice house, they would keep blocks of ice that were over 100 pounds a block, and they could have up to 3,000 pounds in the ice house. So they were storing ice and then selling it to local communities so that, all of us that lived in the area back then could put a block in our ice box and keep our food cold. So this is what it used to look like on Old Ice Pond, over 100 years ago. The long straight trail that you see in the picture towards the right is actually an earthen dam that was made by the ice company to keep the water in the pond. And on the bottom of the mural it's called the spillway, but it is basically where if the water level is too high, it spills over and then will eventually go out into the creek. So it's interesting history, but also it shows you a little bit about the habitat that was always here at the refuge even 100 years ago. So there was always fresh water, it's groundwater fed and then rainwater fed as well. And the ice company enlarged the pond, so likely it was a stream that once they installed the dam that you see in this mural, it made the water spread out, which was perfect for harvesting ice, but also probably improved some habitat, some inland freshwater habitat for waterfowl, which we will talk about. So of course, refrigerators were invented, electrical refrigerators in the 1920s, which meant that harvesting ice on a pond like this was no longer necessary. And the land was left for a number of years. It wasn't being used, of course, by the ice company. It was privately owned. And in the winter, of the ninth, like 1934 and 1933 to 1934, there was a really severe winter on Long Island and the whole Northeast, but there were lows up to negative 22 degrees, which I think it's bad when it's in the 20s and 30s, but I can't imagine negative 22. So the bays were frozen solid, as were other bodies of water, and ducks and geese, of course, need fresh, open water to get food. So, because of a few different things and this really severe winter, duck populations were steeply declining in our local area, to the point where people started noticing, especially duck hunters were noticing that the population of ducks and geese were declining. So in these pictures, these are from the refuge, when a group of local hunters met together and they decided to do something about this drop in population in local ducks and geese populations. So some of the other causes were overhunting, drainage of marshes, and dredging of local bays by commercial duck raisers, for food. So they were dredging like eelgrass to feed commercial ducks, and wild ducks didn't have very much to eat. Because of that and this really, really cold winter, they were dying in really large groups of and large numbers. So this group of hunters and met locally, and they decided to do something about it. They formed the Southampton Township Wildfowl Association, which is the DBA is now Quogue Wildlife Refuge, but that's the organization that they created to band, feed, and protect wild duck populations. So this group, as you can see in these pictures, this is Old Ice Pond here. They put up nest boxes, they fed the ducks, they bred them, and banded them. And they were feeding 30 tons of grain potato feed. They would cut the ice on the pond in the winter so that the ducks could get into the water and eat. And in 1936, they actually won first place prize in the National Wildfowl Refuge Contest. And that was the beginnings of the National Wildlife Federation. But this contest was sponsored by More Game Birds in America. So all across America at this time, the conservation movement, especially in waterfowl conservation and and just conservation in general, like the national parks had gotten started. People were more conservation minded, and especially in a time when it was difficult. The Great Depression um, was impacting people's day-to-day lives, but in our local area, these 45 people, men, came together and started this organization, and it was all volunteer run. They were not making, money off of feeding the ducks and cutting the ice and raising more ducks, but really just an attestament to their effort um, and how much good, came from a group of people who cared. So that's how the refuge got started, and that is why for the Quogue Wildlife Refuge, our logo is still the American black ducks that you can see here. This was their logo, the STWA, and now, of course, ours. But Roland Clark painted this of American black ducks. This was the main duck that they were focusing on conserving. And he is a famous waterfowl artist. So some of his art is, here at the refuge, but in other places too. And this is a picture of Roland Clark and with one of the founders, Charlie Belt, in East Quogue. So ducks and geese are a really large part of the conservation that happened at the refuge. And then, of course, because they had the foresight to protect this land and to make the quality of habitat so great for ducks and geese on Old Ice Pond, we now see so many species of waterfowl. And in North America, you can see 60 species of waterfowl, but on the East Coast, about 50 species. And that includes, so waterfowl is just a term that refers to swans, geese, ducks, teals, and mergansers. So they're all in the same family, which is called Anatidae. And all of these birds have, of course, feathers. They have webbed feet that help them for usually swimming in the water. And many species exhibit, it's called sexual dimorphism, but basically it just means that the male looks different than the female. So if you think of a mallard duck, the male has the bright green head to attract a mate, and the female is usually brown or a camouflaged color so that she can hide the nest when she's sitting on her eggs. So some species exhibit sexual dimorphism. All right, so I know that you are all duck fans as it is, but ducks have some amazing adaptations. So a quick little quiz in which you can do in your head. You don't have to type anything because I know I'm sure all of you had a long day, but we'll go through some amazing adaptations and you can see if you had a good guess in your mind of what species is what. So the heaviest of this group of birds, waterfowl, is the trumpeter swan at the top. Trumpeter swans can weigh 35 pounds. The lightest is the female green-winged teal, which is that second picture there. They are very tiny and they can weigh about 6 ounces. So they're a very small duck. And if you see them on the pond here, compared to a mallard, they look so small. So mallard ducks are a good comparison for a lot of these species because you see mallards everywhere. They're very common. The best diver is the long-tailed duck. They can dive up to 240 feet.
Mm.
And the longest whistle is the golden eye. The golden eye, you can hear the whistle of their wings up to half a mile away. And for the largest egg to size ratio, the ruddy duck, which these ones down here with the tail that almost looks like it's sticking up straight, that's the ruddy duck. Their eggs, when they lay their clutch, can actually weigh more than the female.
Mm.
And then
How does that?
the the duck with the best field division is the wood duck, and the wood ducks can see up to 340 degrees around their head, so they can almost see completely around their head, and that is a great way to escape from predators because some of these smaller waterfowl and of course the smaller ducks, they do have predators. All right, so now that we learned some of these amazing adaptations, we're going to just talk a little bit about tips for observing waterfowl. And one thing that's really cool about the winter time here on Long Island is that it's actually a summer vacation for the ducks and geese that nest in Canada for the summertime. So it's a lot warmer here in the winter than it is in Canada in their breeding grounds. So if you pay attention to habitat and weather, especially weather that's northward of here, you might be able to start seeing some really cool migrating ducks and geese right when the breeding grounds are starting to freeze. That's probably already happened since it's January here, but good to know for next year. Sometimes we'll get like every once in a while we'll see something pretty rare on the pond, and it could be from a storm that blows a bird species in that's not normally here. It could be just them migrating through at certain times because of weather up north. So that's pretty cool. And another thing you want to do is, especially with ducks and geese, is you want to look for the white and where it is and try to remember it. If you have a camera, that's really good for helping identify species. I don't usually take pictures. I just like to go out with binoculars. And bringing them with you everywhere is a really good tip because the moment you don't bring them is when you're gonna see something in the distance that's really cool. And you'll probably hear my voice saying that to you, and then you forgot your binoculars. But that's okay. That's a part of the fun too. But looking for the white is a good field mark because many of the different species will have in their plumage like one or two spots where they'll have white, and that's a really good way to narrow down the species that you think you may have seen. And then bringing a field guide, if you have a favorite field guide, I like to try different ones to see which ones I like the best. And the pamphlets that are laminated, I can't remember the name, but I'll look it up and I'll send it to you all. But those are really great, and you can even write on them in like a fine Sharpie, and you could put like from your field guide onto those pamphlets, IDs that help you. And I think that's a good way because I also don't like to carry a lot with me when I go out. So if you leave one of those in the car, that's a good way to know. And some terms when we're talking about waterfowl is the drake is the male duck, the hen is the female. And when we are thinking of their plumages, there are different times of year when you're going to see the same species in a different plumage. So eclipse plumage is when they are not breeding. So they could be a younger bird. Generally, eclipse plumages are a younger bird that hasn't developed into their like bright breeding feathers, especially with males. And the things that you really want to look for on a duck, their primary feathers are the feathers that are on the front edge of the wing. The secondaries are the ones that are, right in line next to the primaries. And then the speculum is what when you're identifying ducks, generally that will be a different color or have a different lining. So you can see on this wing, do you see the white lining that's above the secondaries? That's a good way. Some ducks either have that or they don't. And so that's something that, we can look at when we're talking about some of the species that come to Long Island or stay here. So a lot of people will ask us too when the pond is frozen how the ducks are surviving because they're walking on ice, their legs are in the water, and they're specifically built for this weather. So what they have inside of their body is called counter current heat exchange, but basically, and seagulls have it too. Um, Inside of their legs, because that's the part that's not covered with the warm downy feathers, the warm blood and the cold blood are really close together, so they're not losing their body temperature in their legs is pretty cold, and that way they're not losing um a lot of body heat from their legs, and they can't get frostbite or get frozen to the ice because they don't have any sweat glands in their feet. So they're not letting out any moisture from their webbed feet. So a mallard at 32 degrees, outside, they only lose about 5% of their body heat from their legs. And then the rest of their body, of course, is covered in downy feathers that just traps the heat in. So I'm sure a lot of you have a down jacket. A lot of times now our jackets have like artificial down in it, but down is really, really warm and it keeps them, perfectly situated for the winter time. Another thing that I just wanted to mention is ducks and geese cannot be fed bread, although a lot of people think that it is okay to feed them bread. But what it does is it fills up their stomach with this like non-nutritious food. And unfortunately, especially when they're very young, it can cause, it's called angel wing, but it causes their wings to grow out and turn at a joint where once that happens, they can't fly anymore. So you'll see ducks and geese here that have it because they were released here by rehabilitators. But bread is actually really bad for ducks and geese, and it is not nutritious at all. What they do eat, though, out in the pond is great for them. So they should be eating vegetation, small insects in the water. Some eat fish. So that's what they should be eating. So just a public service announcement. You can tell your friends bread is really bad for ducks and geese and generally all wildlife. So the fun thing about watching ducks and geese in the wintertime is that it's their breeding season. So they're doing a lot of cool things that you can look for, and it's all to find love. So in this video, you can see the mallard is they're pumping their heads. So that's what that
Oh,
is called. They're kind of, it looks like they're doing a funny dance, but many ducks are lifelong breeders, so they're monogamous and they'll pair every year. Some pairs will last the whole year. So this is kind of like they're trying to impress the ladies, and their courtship starts in the fall. So by now, almost like three-quarters of the duck populations have already paired. So when you see ducks that are, in a group, or like you see two ducks together, a male and a female, they probably have already paired, and then they'll stay together when they go to the breeding grounds and they migrate north. So our flyway is the Atlantic flyway, and you can follow the green icons of ducks to see where some of our species might be going when they go up north or when we see them along the East Coast. But there are, different flyways in the United States. The Central Flyway and the Mississippi Flyway are also really important for duck populations in the United States. And in the middle of the United States, it's called the Duck Factory of America. So, show you what it looks like. So, in where this red icon is along, the Midwest and up through Canada is called the Prairie Pothole region. And they're glacially formed small ponds, but it is such important habitat for waterfowl because they can breed all along those potholes. And we see on Ola Dice Pond some breeding ducks and geese. And but areas like that where there are small habitats that perhaps they don't have as many predators as like a larger pond like we have here, a 10-acre pond is really important for ducks. All right, so on the pond, our pond is probably around 6 feet deep at its deepest, and it's a 10-acre pond. When the STWA got started, they actually put the islands out onto the pond as waterfowl breeding habitat. So those islands are really important out on the pond because ducks can get there, but a lot of predators won't bother going out to the island to try to eat eggs or to try to predate on a resting duck or a sleeping duck. So that's why those islands were built. They were built just for ducks and geese. And a really cool thing the other day when the pond was frozen, maybe last week, um, from the nature center, you could see the frozen ice, and there's all these duck footprints because they'll walk, back and forth to land. But there was also a fox footprint. So the fox are smart too. They know that there's, ducks out on the water and out on the pond, but he didn't get too far. Like the fox just went around the front of the nature center and then probably went back into the onto the trail because he would have gotten wet if he kept going. Okay, anyway, the main types that we see on Old Ice Pond is the Canada goose, the mallard duck, and the American black duck. So these are the three main species that we'll see and prefer this habitat over, say, like, this is all freshwater, so these species of ducks really prefer like an inland freshwater body that they can spend some time on. And we'll get started with these three, and then we'll jump into the other species that we see often here at the refuge. So the Canada goose used to be uncommon on Long Island in the early 1900s. Their populations have definitely grown, and we see some usually every year around the end of April, we'll see a pair with goslings, which is really fun to see. So all of the pictures that say QWR on them were taken here at the refuge. And so that's always fun to see the Canada goose. And then you can tell, of course, that it's a Canada goose. It has that long neck, the iconic like white stripe under their eye. and they will usually be the largest bird that's out on the pond. And then in terms of dabbling ducks, so the ducks can either be diving ducks or dabbling ducks. They dabbling ducks usually tip down into the water, tip up their tail feathers, and they rarely go completely underwater. So there are 31 species in this genus. The mallard duck is definitely the most common. There are 11 million mallard ducks breeding birds, and they do really well in all types of habitats, suburban habitats, urban habitats, and then of course we'll see them, in wild places too. So they're they're really common, and the bright green head is the male, and the female has that brown body. If you're confused about telling a female mallard from a female black duck. We'll talk about black ducks in a second, but you can see the white edging on the speculum. Both the male and the female has that. So you can see the female mallard has that blue speculum patch and the white edging, and American black ducks don't have that. So that's one way to tell. And this is just a fun video that we have taken over the years in the winter time. So it looks like they're ice skating on the ice, which is fun to see. But they also have that curly tail, if you guys caught that in the video. They have feathers on the back of their tail feathers that are curly, and that's another way that you know it's a mallard duck, because not all ducks have that. So the American black duck is a very shy duck. They spend their breeding season spring, summer up north. So northern New York, Canada, and their populations, this was the duck that declined severely, especially through the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 70s. In the 1970s, there were 800,000 ducks shot per year, and that's why their populations were declining so steeply. They were overhunted, but they are a prized bird for hunters to get because they are so shy around people. Oftentimes at the refuge, if you see like a flock of black ducks, even if they see you from the windows of the nature center, they will start swimming away. They might fly away too. So they are very shy, but there's lots of room where they can go and spend some quiet time in the back of the pond. But again, one way to know that it is an American black duck, they have all chocolatey brown feathers. They don't have the speculum line. So above their blue speculum patch, the wing patch, they don't have that white line. They also have, silver edged wings. So if you look inside of their wings, that's one thing you'll see a lot when they're flying. It looks like they have silver on the inside. So that's a good way to know. And then telling the male black duck from the male has a bright yellow bill and the female has a gray bill. So we love seeing black ducks here, especially because they are the duck that the refuge was founded for. They're on our logo. So these pictures were taken at the refuge too. So you can tell these are all males because they have that bright yellow bill. And then another duck that we have been seeing pretty frequently is the gadwall. The gadwall is sometimes called the gray duck because they look so gray. But when you see their body up close, it's actually this like amazing pattern of colors that even though they're not bright, they're so beautiful. So you can even see like on the back of the male has more gray in his body. The female has more brown. So right here, these were some standing on the ice. Um, and they have a white wing patch. So that if you see white, again, look for the white sticking out, and that's a good way to know that what kind of species you're looking at. So they are seasonally monogamous, so they'll usually pair pretty early and then stay with their mate. This was a cool picture that we took here and just another dabbling duck. So again, you can compare behavior. You can try to remember, say you're out in on a walk and you see a duck that's not diving, it's just dabbling, and you see a certain, field ID like that white patch. That's a really good thing to take back with you and then try to use your field guide to look up some of those tips. And these guys breed up in Canada as well. But in certain years, we'll see like maybe 6 or 8 pairs of gadwall on the pond, and they'll pretty much stay. It seems like they stay for the whole winter just in this area, and then they probably go like, maybe out onto the creek, but pretty fun to see them. And then they'll hang out with other ducks, they'll hang out with black ducks, but then they'll also like stay around other pairs of gadwall. The green-winged teal is much smaller, a lot smaller than the mallard. And they're called green-winged teal because they have the green speculum patch on their wing. They're really fast, and to me, they're a little hard to see sometimes. Like, um, if you look at a big flock of geese and ducks, you can almost miss them because they're so tiny. They might be like tucked behind another species, but they can live for a long time. The oldest green-winged teal was around 20 years old, and every year they pick a new partner. And they will filter invertebrates from the water with their beak. So that's how they feed. They'll feed on the top of the water, into the water, and dabble into the water and filter through invertebrates from the water. This is one of my favorite ducks. I think they're so beautiful. The blue-winged teal. Another teal, so they're smaller than the mallard. And they have this beautiful white crescent along their beak. That's the male. And these guys are really long distance migrants. So they will sometimes spend their winters even in other countries. So they'll fly really long distances. They are called the blue-winged teal because in flight they have this dusty blue patch above their wing there. So it's again a little hard to see if you didn't have binoculars or take a picture, but the crescent is really obvious. Say you saw one in the pond. And for the female, she is much more camouflaged. And a good way to tell is by looking at the shape of the head. Like for ducks, sometimes they'll have either a flat forehead or a sloped forehead. So if the female in shape looked like the male, that would be a way to identify. These guys are almost unmistakable. They're a large duck. It's called the northern shoveler, and they have a long bill that's almost 3 inches long. It's very flat on the edges because they will be filtering water. And the inside of their beak has these little notches that are called lamellae, but it helps them filter water. So the northern shoveler is another species that comes to Long Island for the winter time. They look similar colors to the mallard, like they have that bright green head, but on the edges of their body, they have a little bit more chestnut brown. And then, of course, look for like a huge beak. And that's how you know it's a shoveler. And we've seen them here, not super frequently, but they have been around. So this was a picture of one that was back in the pond. And that is a photo of how their filter feeding device. It's called the lamellae, but you can see it right on the edge. Those spikes help them filter the water. So really cool. Another duck that we see here in the winter is called the American widgeon. They also have the nickname bald pate. Because it looks like they have a little bald patch on their head because it's white. And bald eagles are called that too, not because they don't have any feathers, but because they have the white head. So it used to be an old English term, bald meaning white-headed. So that's why their nickname is bald pate. But American widgeons, generally the top two pictures are what you would see. They have a green eye patch and a white crown. And then males have a white bill and females have a bit of a grayer bill. And then, can everybody see the difference between the top male picture to the bottom male picture? So this is just a natural variation of widgeon where they have a little bit more like almost cream under their face and into the crown, and that's called a storm widgeon. So just a natural variety of widgeon. And in certain years, we'll see a lot of widgeons here. And in others, like this year, I haven't seen any widgeons, but I'm sure it's just because I haven't looked. But this is at the refuge when they're mixed in with mallards and geese. Sometimes they can hide, but you know when you see that white crown that it is a widgeon. And a really beautiful species of duck is the northern pintail. They just look so elegant. This is a species that actually migrates at night, pretty much solely. They are a long distance migrant. So sometimes you'll see long distance migrants earlier in the season or like on the shelter seasons, but they can fly 1,800 miles and not stop. So they are great, elegant flyers, and they do have a pintail. You can see that really long tail, a feather that goes behind their tail feathers. And that's how they get their name, pintail. The females are a little bit tricky because they don't have many ID marks other than, um, their speculum is lined in white, but it's not, super bright like a mallard would be bright blue. But if you can tell by the shape of their head and neck, it's a lot different than the mallard. So you kind of have to look at the details in some of the female birds to tell what they are. And you can tell she has the same shape as the male. So that same elegant forehead and neck, like a skinny tapered neck. And then in the field, so it's kind of fun, like showing you the professional pictures and then the pictures that I've taken at the refuge because they're a lot harder to tell what it is because it's not close up and it's not the best quality image or I'm not the best photographer, but you can still tell that it's a pintail based on the really long tail there, the gray body, and then that elegant neck. And then this is actually an okay picture, a good picture. It came, I think, pretty close to the nature center one day, so we snapped a picture of this beautiful duck. So pretty. And then wood ducks are called the most beautiful duck in North America because when you look at those jewel tones on the male, they're just like stunning. And if you see one in light, they're just so beautiful. They have really strong claws at the end of their webbed toes. So wood ducks are called that because they will actually nest up in tree cavities. So this is a duck, whereas almost all the other ducks that we saw before nest on shore of land. The wood duck actually nests in either a nest box, but definitely in the cavity of a tree, so a hole in a tree or in a nest box. And the female can go up into a tree, lay her eggs inside of the tree. When the babies hatch, they actually jump and fall to the ground. They're totally fine. They're so light and small that they just bounce, off the leaves and then they're ready to follow their mom around. So if you ever see a duck in a tree, I would bet you money that it was a wood duck. And they will sometimes actually dump their eggs in a cavity of a nest box that's not their own. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But some field IDs is like they have this beautiful, almost like a mohawk on the back of their head. And the female has it a little bit, so you can kind of see from this picture that she has like a little bit of a mohawk, and the male is pretty easy to ID with all of those different bright colors, the red in his bill and a red eye. And then the female has the white eye patch. That's something to look for. That's a really good field ID. They also make a very distinguishable noise. So if you're walking around the refuge in the spring and you hear like a high-pitched whistle, um, and you could definitely look it up online. It's pretty distinguishable and you probably would remember it. So if you hear that, you know a wood duck is around. They're pretty good at hiding. They don't want to be out in the open sometimes because they have predators. But in the sunlight, on the pond, if you see a wood duck, they're just amazing and so beautiful. And then sometimes you see them in a tree. So this girl was up in a tree, like right past the nature center. She's in the middle there, perfectly camouflaged, probably looking for a good nest site. And in the springtime, we'll usually see wood duck chicks with their mom. I think last year there was a group that we saw around a couple different groups, and there was like 3 or 4 chicks in each clutch, and they did really well. And they were big, by the end of the summertime. So sometimes they'll get predated, and that's just, natural, but it's fun to see them when they're really tiny and then grow up into big birds. But wood ducks, so this is a picture of a cavity in a nest box. So there are other birds that like to nest in cavities like eastern screech owls, and you can see the wood duck laid her eggs. It's called brood parasitism, but basically they'll just dump eggs sometimes and not incubate them. And this wood duck hatched in a screech owl box. This was a family in Florida who were observing and taking pictures. So it hatched inside of this nest box with a screech owl, which could be a predator. But what ended up happening from the story was just that the baby wood duck ended up jumping from the box and probably joined, a mom that was nearby. And it didn't have to be removed or there didn't have to be intervention. So, and it didn't get predated by an owl, but kind of cool. So, if you ever see a hole in a tree that's probably around the size of of a closed fist, that's a really good hole for lots of different animals. And then we have diving ducks. So we covered dabbling ducks that stay on the surface of the water. Dabbling ducks usually have feet that are at the back of the body, help propelling them through the water. Diving ducks usually eat things like fish. They can stay underwater for a long time, which can make it challenging to observe them. This is a species that's pretty common called the ringneck duck. You might be wondering why it's called ringneck duck because you don't really see a ring around its neck, but you do see a ring around its bill. So that's something you can look for. You can look for the ring on its bill in the male. And it's called ringneck duck because they have a ring of chocolatey brown feathers that matches up to like darker black chocolatey brown feathers. So that's why they're called ring-necked duck. And so maybe I'm not saying it's a bad name, but it is a little bit hard to tell to see the ring neck. Um, but definitely some ID features are the slope of the forehead. You can see it's like pretty aggressively back. It has a long neck, a kind of a bigger head. And the female, has the same shape. You can see she also has white around her eye. That's a good telltale sign that it's a ringneck duck. This is a very common bird that we see at the refuge. Hooded mergansers are so entertaining to watch because they're always diving, they're always moving. Sometimes they'll come up with fish from the pond, which is really cool. And they're pretty petite. They're pretty small ducks, but you can watch them for a long time here. And the males have that like mohawk and white in the center. The females have the same mohawk, but she's mostly brown. So they're pretty distinguishable. They are also cavity nesters, but they nest up north, so they don't nest here. And they have a third eyelid, so when they go underwater, their third eyelid, it's called a nictitating membrane, will cover their eye. It's almost like goggles. So they'll put that eyelid down. It's like goggles they can see underwater, catch fish, crawfish. And this is right outside the nature center. So they are amazing diving ducks. And I think in this video, one pulls up a fish that you can see. Oh yeah, but it's just at the edge of the screen. And now it's in the middle. So you can see that when the girl there caught a nice big fish. So fun to watch. And there are different species of mergansers. So we just talked about the hooded merganser, and this is the common merganser. Common mergansers are a top predator in the food chain. So they also eat fish. And they have a little bit longer body. They are bigger than the hooded merganser. The males have a green head, but mostly white body. Females have like a mohawk. And you'll usually see common mergansers like in different parts of bodies of water. So like they do like fresh water, but you can also see them in different bodies of water. So in case you ever like to go to the beach, take a beach walk, you might see common mergansers and red-breasted mergansers. They can have many different or I'm sorry, many numbers of chicks. So you can see that this female had 50 chicks, and what most likely happened was that in the area there were other moms that had chicks. Maybe they came together and then they all just stayed with this one female. So she has her work cut out for her, but baby ducks and geese are they imprint on their mom, so they will follow, and that's what they are. That's a life strategy for them. So they don't wait in the nest for food. They're born and they follow their mom. So really interesting. This was in Minnesota. And then the third species of merganser is the red-breasted merganser. They have kind of a disheveled appearance compared to the common merganser, which looks like all tucked up and nice. The red-breasted merganser has like a mohawk, a shaggy mohawk. They are really fast flyers. They can fly 81 miles an hour, and they are fish eaters. So you'll often see them like, we've seen them in the pond here, but also I see them a lot on the bay. And again, in poor lighting and in bad pictures, it's hard to tell exactly what you're looking at. But again, if you look for the white, do you guys see how it has a white collar? That is a way to tell that it's a red-breasted merganser. So looking for the white really does help, especially if you get a quick glance, it flies away, as birds like to do. It's really helpful to see that field ID. And then another really one of my favorites is the ruddy duck. I just think they're so adorable and so cute. The male has a bright blue bill, and they they are pretty sleepy during the day. They actually feed at night to escape predators that, are more common during the day, like hawks, different other kinds of birds. So they're active at night, but they will form really big floats together. So there could be like 50, 100 ducks in one float. And sometimes you'll see them in like the creek or the bay, all floating together, resting. But they're pretty unique. They have that tail almost like a rudder when they're diving. It helps, steer them. And then they have a pretty short neck. They have short wings. And unlike other ducks that we talked about, they don't make their breeding pairs until they get to their nesting site. So sometimes we'll see like lone ruddy ducks on the pond. They're not with another ruddy duck because they don't pair up until they get to the breeding site. So again, in poor lighting, it's a challenge to see, but you can tell there where the white is there next to the blue beak. And then that tail that's like just sticking straight up is how you know that it's a ruddy duck. And some more photos for you from the refuge. Buffleheads are a little less common here at the refuge, but I see them in other places pretty frequently. Buffleheads, they are seen more towards saltwater. And they are very small diving ducks. The male has a lot more white on his body than the female, but this is a photo of one that we have seen at the refuge, and it's a female, so you can see the white is next to the bill. And then I just wanted to throw these together so that you could see some of the other different species of ducks that aren't as common to see on a freshwater pond like we have here, but they are common in different areas. So if you go to the bay, Shinnecock Inlet, if you take a walk on the ocean, you'll most likely see some of these species, like the long-tailed duck is very common, and the scoters, the eiders. So it's fun to get out there and bring binoculars and bring some hot cocoa and go birding, on the beach. So yeah, sometimes we will see ducks that are salty ducks that like to be in salt water. They'll spend some time in fresh water too, nothing's impossible. And these are scaup, so we can go back and see there are the two species of scaup, greater scaup and lesser scaup, and it's really hard to identify them in the field because they look so similar. But the greater scaup has a sheen of green, lesser has a sheen of blue on their head. It's kind of tricky. And then we've got some other duck-like birds that we'll see often here, pie-billed grebe. They are really, really cool birds that they're not ducks, but they do kind of act like one. They dive and catch fish. Um, they have these amazing feet. So you can see this one is keeping the foot up by its face for a minute, and you can see they're like just amazing and spread out, perfect paddles for going underwater, and they disappear really quickly when they want to go underwater. And they have some pretty cool nicknames like Hell Diver because they just disappear like in an instant, but they're fun to watch. And then loons you can see across other bodies of water, and not too often here, although we did see one last year in, we call it Chocolate Pudding Pond, but there was a loon back there. And it may have accidentally like taken the spillway tunnel and been in Chocolate Pudding Pond, but it was really cool to see, and eventually it just left. Um, they they can't take off from land. So if they get grounded on land, they cannot fly. They have to be in water and have like a good lead up to flying. So in case you ever see one, it's just something to know that they need to be in water and have a like a long runway to take off. But you can tell they have a chunky beak. The breeding plumage we don't see very often on Long Island because they're up in Maine when they're breeding. But the picture on the right-hand side, the non-breeding plumage, is what we see a lot on Long Island. So look for a heavy bill, look for like a really large bird, a diving bird. They're heavy bodied. Um, and I bet you'll see one this winter if you're looking for one. Brants are another bird that we don't really see very often here because they do like to be in like the saltwater tidal zone, and they are smaller than a Canada goose. They have this beautiful black neck with a little bit of white on their neck, which is really cool. I love brants. I think they're beautiful. Snow goose are something to look for too. So snow goose, they have a white body, easy to identify. And this was one that we saw on the pond, just a lone snow goose. They migrate from up north. And then to confuse you even more, there are species of ducks that can hybridize with each other. So if you see a duck that it's not making sense or it's hard to identify, um, it might be a hybrid. So these are some that we've seen at the refuge, this mallard pintail duck. So you can, it looks like a pintail because of that really long straight tail and because of some of these feathers, but then its head looks like a mallard. It's a little confusing. So there's, it seems like endless permutations of duck hybrids. There's a cool website you can look at if you ever get a picture and try to identify it. So if you see one that doesn't exactly make sense, it could be a hybrid. It's kind of fun. And then the black ducks, when they hybridize with mallards, they look like a black duck body, like the chocolatey brown, but then they have the mallard like a stripe of green. I think it's pretty cool. And these are some hybrids that we've seen over the years and tried to document, take pictures of, and you can see the one in the center on the right is a mallard black duck. Both are black duck mallard hybrids. And then always something to keep in mind is sporadic and very sporadic visitors to North America. Could be really rare, but if you do see something, it might be worth trying to get a picture of or talking to a local Audubon society, just like that bird, that cuckoo in Riverhead. So it's kind of cool to just really not everything's going to be sporadic and rare, but um, it's always an option. And many different organizations work to conserve ducks and geese, waterfowl populations. Luckily, the majority of species are not endangered, so they are at low risk and they're hardy. There's a lot of water around for them, but of course, preserving their habitats, local actions like not feeding bread to ducks and geese, those are really important things. Fishing line, lead shot is another big problem. So, if you have friends that are hunters, the lead shot is a really big problem because they feed in the water where the lead is and then eat, can get lead poisoning. But yeah, even doing beach cleanups, everything helps. A little bit goes a long way. And now, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them in the chat. Or if you would like to unmute yourself, you can, but I really appreciate you staying the whole time. I know it's one of my favorite topics, so I talked a lot. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, or unmute yourself. But we are looking forward to a really good winter season. You can check for local sightings on eBird. So it's run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And yeah, eBird's a great resource in case you wanted to stay cozy and warm at home. If you're looking for a certain species, you can look on there. And great question. How many species of ducks would you see on an average day on the pond? And I would say on an average day, in the wintertime here, at least 3 to 4. You'll definitely see mallards, Canada geese, hooded mergansers, and lately there has been like one or two around like pintails or the gadwall. So it kind of depends, but um, that's what I would say. And then some days it just seems like everybody's flying in for the evening. So I would say morning or evening are good times to come to see, look over at the spillway or from the dock, see what you can find. And yeah, thank you all for saying all those kind things. I really appreciate it. Um, the what can you feed ducks if you are looking to feed, like say you go to a duck pond and there are domestic species there. Sometimes you'll see domestic species and there might be mallards and stuff. I personally wouldn't recommend feeding really anything, only because it does habituate them to humans and it can be dangerous for them along roadsides. But if you are going to feed anything, you can go pick up some duck feed from a local store, like Agway sells duck feed. Um, Black oil sunflower seeds are not bad for them, so stuff like that, I would say. And then yeah, it's a maybe that's even a better way, a powerful tool to teach, bread is bad, but this is a better food for them. Here, we do, if it's really cold, we will supplement like with duck feed because we try to keep the pond open for the ducks with a water pump so that they can get their own food. But sometimes we will supplement them, especially if we have a angel wings that can't fly away. And another good question, do the different ducks all get along when they're on the pond together? And it actually does seem like they all get along. The geese are very aggressive. In general, geese are very aggressive. So that would be the one thing that I would say. Um, they like to scare the little guys away, but it's their natural behavior. And if there's a predator in the area, the geese will also like, one time there was an osprey that landed in the pond because it had a fish in its talons that was too big. And the geese actually, because it was flapping in the pond with the fish in its talons, geese came around the islands and started trying to drown the osprey. They're really aggressive. And it ended up being okay. We kind of assisted the osprey, but don't mess with a Canada goose. All right. Well, thank you all so much, and hopefully we'll see you at an upcoming event. I would definitely recommend getting tickets for Light the Night on January 24th. That's one of my favorite events that we do here, and you can become a member of the refuge for the calendar year. An individual membership is $35 and a family membership is 50. But we rent cross-country skis to members if we get more snow. It's free for members to rent cross-country skis. And, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. You can email me or on our website, we have a lot of information too. But thank you guys so much. And that's a cool sighting about tufted ducks. I have never seen them. So that is really cool. I agree, they are very rare here. All right. Well, thank you all so much and enjoy your night. And hopefully we'll see you soon.